Welcome back to our second episode in Pacific Horticulture's three-part series on the Climate Ready Landscape Plants Project. 6 Western universities and institutions are working together with USDA grant funding to assist the green industry and to show the public what will thrive and what will perish when plants are pushed to their limits. The Western U.S. is expected to experience more extreme droughts due to climate change. Beautiful, low water use plants will be critical to crafting inspiring, sustainable home landscapes. The Climate Ready Landscape Plants Project tells us which plants can take the lowest water conditions in vastly different climates, from Utah to Washington. Today, we are diving deeper into the methods of the study, how local climate conditions are affecting the plants, and finally, getting an early look at a few peak performers, some of which may surprise you.
All of the sites are now in the treatment and data collection phase, which is really exciting. So that means that the plants have been in the ground for at least a year and a half. So they were planted either a year ago in the spring or in fall of 2020. So each site is now monitoring the weather and filling out their irrigation budget sheet that's based on their site-specific weather conditions and their soil type, and then beginning their irrigation treatment.
It's the largest irrigation trial in the Western region, which is, a premier irrigation study area.
We are doing everything same except the locations, so we can find out which plant is good for which locations by the end of this project.
It's special to have this many different collaborators doing relatively similar and in some cases identical research. It's totally unique. It's fantastic.
When you think about the sites that we have, they vary tremendously in climate. And if we can find out how these plants have adapted to these different climates and also to the different irrigation regimes, I think we all can learn a lot about how far plants can be used, like at different elevations and at different microclimates, because we have this tremendous range. Here in Arizona, we're in a very hot climate. It's very arid. June is the month with the highest evapotranspiration demand, and we often get temperatures up to 110 degrees Fahrenheit during the day. In January, we had a very severe freeze here. It went down to 25 degrees Fahrenheit. So we have a lot of fluctuations, not only annually, but also daily. We usually have about 30 degrees Fahrenheit difference between the minimum and the maximum. Not all the plants are as well adapted to this climate. So it will be very interesting to see how over the couple of months that we have left for this evaluation, how they will actually fare and which ones may actually not survive and which ones will survive.
In our case, in Seattle, Pacific Northwest, we are dealing with those wet spring as well as hot summer. If we were selecting plants for really hot and dry summer that would do well, there isn't a guarantee that those plants will also do well during the wet and cool spring. So we have to find those that are able to be plastic enough to be able to handle most of those conditions. So that was kind of a take-home message that is going from this year's experiment. If we can find those plants throughout this large network of this research infrastructure, I think that's going to be a fascinating outcome.
That's what I'm most excited about. Seeing if we can identify some plants from among the group that really stand out as being, head and shoulders above the rest with regard to performance under drought stress.
The term climate change is so much more evocative than just what we used to say with global warming, because there are a lot of abnormal weather events that are also coming on top of this. So we've seen that just in this year with weird warming really early, plants pushed out new growth and then got nipped by frost at a lot of our sites. And then Utah, we went out and visited Utah And they had plants that were all budded out, and they sent us photos the next week of snow on the ground. So there are just a lot of really strange things. Our site in Oregon was underwater for really long. And when it finally dried up, it was in the high, 90s the next week. So just these really, drastic swings, and it underscores the fact that we really need to have plants that are going to be able to weather these dramatic changes. And I think resilience in the plants is really key.
And a lot of what we hear or think about climate change is this average shift, right? Well, it will be 2 degrees warmer, right? And so it's like you were saying, like this progression, but it's really not happening like that, right? Like it's each site currently is already experiencing extreme weather. We're looking at how they're responding, their gas exchange, right? So how they're photosynthesizing and transpiring differently with these big swings, or if the soil is drying out much faster, how does the plant respond quickly? We have this large latitudinal gradient, and we're saying maybe in the future it will be colder, maybe it will be hotter, maybe it will be drier, maybe it will be wetter. And we're kind of able to live that out in real time and then make sort of predictions and recommendations.
I think we need to change the consumer or people's perception, say, from having a heavy water using plants, a turf landscape, high water using plants, to climate ready plants. And that can be done by demonstration, extension, showing people that this can be done. I think we need to make a new normal, and with the climate ready landscape plants, I think we are moving in the right direction.
We promote irrigating based on water use, and that's more weather related rather than schedule related. And that's how we irrigate our fields, is we track how much water a reference crop would utilize or extract out of the soil. We track that, and then at some trigger point we replace that amount of water. So that's entirely dependent on the weather of the day or week or whatever, and it's not every Tuesday. The range of performance across the sites was very interesting. From when we were at South Coast in the early June, the purple pillar were 5 feet tall, but in Washington and Oregon, they haven't started yet. Yeah, they were short. The purple pillar at South Coast were budded. The pink chiffon were in flower. But I think that is the importance of having these 6 sites in the different climates, is because we want to see how they perform in these different climates. And I think we're getting that.
We have some plants actually not doing well through the winter, like roses. Roses and the whiteheads, they're doing pretty good actually. And then we have some single ceanosis, and one of the hibiscus, and then rosemary, Erica Mary, they're not doing quite good with the cold temperature.
So we have some Hibiscus syriacus and Hibiscus madrensis cultivars, both from our breeder cooperator and from the industry, to use as standards, that are sort of delighting everybody because they're not used as much. There are a couple of the industry cultivars, pink chiffon and purple pillar, that we're using for standards, that people at the open houses are like, I didn't really like hibiscus. These are pretty spectacular. So that's been really fun to see. And then we do have this one really tough as nails little rose from the House of Mayon that's called Petite Knockout, that's being sold by Star, that's showing really good promise as well. To me, I think that's probably the most surprising thing, is that there are some really resilient plants that can perform across a wide range of conditions.
From the preliminary data that we have, among a lot of different plants, Rosa was sitting pretty, is a variety that did best among the plant that we evaluated in terms of like when you look at 80% irrigation, 50 and 20. So it was good. And when people came and look at those plants, that was their favorite plants. Most of the people, they selected that as a favorite plant. So that's doing good. Of course, it's only one evaluation and we need to look repeatedly over the plants and see how it does over a course of period. But that is what we saw.
This Vitex Delta Blues became our #1 participant favorite in the spring and summer events, just because it was able to maintain, just a really high wow factor, both in terms of plant stature and size and flowering. So it's one of those situations. I guess if this would be a horse race, everything would be kind of neck and neck, and it would be finished much sooner. But with the plant trials, it's sort of everything is neck and neck now. But it takes longer for that race to finish.
I follow the trends of the industry because I don't breed in a vacuum. What we try to do is if there's a need in a plant group, we try to see you can't improve an aspect or a trait of a plant if there's not a source for that trait. And so if you can identify some sources that perform better than others, then that gives you a starting place. So that is where I think the huge benefit to me as a breeder and to other folks that are looking to select for improved climate adaptation.
When we talk about ecosystem services, we mostly think about the biological aspects of it, pollinators and things like the habitat. But there's also the environmental aspects, microclimate cooling, pollutant filtration, things like that. But the thing that we don't talk about are the social benefits, like you mentioned, the mental health benefits, the economic benefits to urban systems, things like that. To me, that kind of gets pushed aside, and it shouldn't.
We don't have to be deprived from having a green and beautiful environment. We all know that it's really important to have green landscapes and to have functional landscapes because they are so important for our mental health and for the physical health. You can have beautiful plants if you treat them correctly and don't over or underwater them.
And one hopeful takeaway that I also have for the trial is that we can identify low water plants that will work in all different landscape types, as opposed to a conception that low water use plants, people tend to think of cacti and other succulents. And while cacti and succulents are nice, not everyone really likes that look. I really find it exciting to identify plants that can serve all the different aesthetic niches that are low water use and kind of expanding that palette.
Sue and Lloyd and some of the other folks are actually collecting physiological data to help us better understand how the plants, not just whether or not certain plants are adapting, but how, like what are they doing physiologically. So those are the interesting things to me.
The folks up at University of Washington, they want to look at the plants that are doing well on low water. They want to study their plasticity for this resilience. So they want to look at, they're proposing for us to look at chlorophyll fluorescence to see how efficient the photosynthesis mechanism is working, stomatoconductance, how well the transpirational controls are, and stomatal density. Is there a change in the number of stomata in response to drought stressors? So that's another aspect that we're exploring.
This project has gotten a lot of attention locally. When people hear about it, they're very interested in it. And I think, hearing what Lauren and Gary are saying about how it's really showing folks, especially in areas affected by long-term droughts and these severe droughts, that there is a way forward here and still having things that look great that don't need as much water use. I think, there is a great interest in that.
So for our field days, we invite members of the landscape and horticultural trades. And for us, it's really exciting because we get to see the feedback of the horticultural world on kind of how they're rating the plants that we're evaluating every month. And then for them, what we try and provide is an opportunity to evaluate the plant material in a field setting, as opposed to seeing something in a nursery pot, kind of packed together with other plants.
The near-term goals are that we will be providing lists of research-validated plants that are new or underutilized varieties that we'll know now how drought tolerant or what's the most climate appropriate landscape for them, from Arizona to Washington.
You can say, oh, this is a low water use plant, but now we have it actually quantified. And at the end of this experiment, we can say, yes, these plants, they will do well at 20 and 50% ETO, and other plants, they definitely require 80%.
The most optimistic outcome of the project for me is seeing the plants that we're evaluating in the landscape and seeing them offered in retail and wholesale nurseries. I can remember the first time I saw a plant that we evaluated, like us, from Sunshine, and it did really well, and I never could really find it somewhere. And then I ended up finding it in a Home Depot, and it was just really cool.
I think the most exciting thing is to see the impact of the message on such a wide range of people. In the beginning, say 16 years ago, it really felt like an uphill climb to try to get a consensus among the nurseries, among the landscape architects and the designers. It's really hard to change people's minds about plants. It's really hard to get them to see, yes, there are beautiful plants that can also conserve water. And so it's been really rewarding to see people come out, to hear about how conservatively we water these, the methods that we use, how infrequently we water, how carefully we water, and then to see the light bulbs go off when they see some gorgeous plant that's only been irrigated once a month. And they go, oh, okay, it's true. We can change the way we do things and still have beautiful landscapes. So I think the whole mindset is changing throughout the state now. And there's enough momentum going that we have something to contribute to that message and to that change of mind and that change of aesthetic and what that looks like. So for me, that's been the most exciting. Acceptance of the message.
Stay tuned for episode 3 to find out the best drought-loving plants for your region. Click the link below to subscribe or follow Pacific Horticulture for the latest science-backed information and inspiration for your Western garden.